And now, please welcome the CEO and co-founder at GetYourGuide, Johannes Reck, in conversation with Skift Senior Hospitality Editor, Sean O'Neill.
I'm curiously far away here, but Johannes. We're very excited. We're talking about how we're all going to be traveling differently. Is sort of the overarching theme of Megatrends 2023. And all of the megatrends that we've talked about, they have a common theme, and a lot of it is about millennials becoming sort of coming of age in terms of being major buyers of travel, experiences taking a front and center part of how travel booking happens, and technology adoption at the back end. And so all that maps onto what GetYourGuide is doing. GetYourGuide has been riding a lot of these dynamics like a rocket ship for growth. It's an online travel agency for tours and activities or experiences bookings. It's worth more than $1 billion. And so we're super happy for Johannes to have flown in from Berlin to join us today. Thank you, Johannes.
Very happy to be here. Thank you, Sean.
I guess we'll start out. There's a concept that you've talked about recently that you feel like is an important, not just for the tours and activity sector, but for all travel suppliers, a change dynamic, which you call verticalization. So what is that and why is it important?
Maybe before we go into verticalization, let us take a step back. And I want to tell you a story. My favorite place that I traveled to so far is Sequoia National Park. Have you been, Sean?
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
3,000-year-old trees.
Absolutely beautiful place with these massive trees. And when I went there, I had a guided tour, and the guide told me the reason those trees grow so tall is because they're actually very resilient to fires, and there are lots of wildfires there. So every time there's a wildfire, basically all the small woodwork and the small trees disappear, and then the sequoias, grow under the Californian sun, and they become taller, both in terms of growing in size, but also growing deep into the ground. And the reason why I tell you this story is because I think, as a travel industry, we just came out of the biggest wildfire there was, right? The pandemic, right? Everything was devastated. We're all struggling and, fighting to survive. And then 2022 was this massive year of rebound. GetYourGuide exploded, and we did very well. And obviously now it's a question of what's next? What's coming now? And I do think this metaphor of the sequoia is really intelligent because if you think about it, the sequoia ultimately really figured out what the core, the essence of growth was. And I think for a lot of the online travel platforms, if you look at it, what's our reason to exist? How can we really serve the customer in a unique and better way? And I think we all came out with, we really need to focus again on our core. And in the case of travel experiences, that's really around search, discovery, relevance, being the best vertical search engine ultimately for consumers. The last 10 years of travel was very much dominated by general search, mostly through Google and Google Maps, and consumers were browsing on Google and tapping on different sites. But now there are all these trends that point towards vertical search. Which is, things like, consumers moving to apps, for instance. We'll talk later about AI, machine learning, ChatGPT, right? There are like so many powerful forces now behind vertical search specialists. And I'm super excited about 2023 because now I think rebounding from the pandemic and growing into this new normal, this will be the mega trend to watch.
Okay, so I like that. So it's a metaphor of the sequoia tree sort of evolved in a Darwinian way for a growth over 3,000 years. It sort of grew literally vertically. And there, maybe if you could paint a picture of what was like the traveler path to purchase before and how is it under verticalization? What's the difference?
The difference is that consumers, and you see that, by the way, not only in experiences, but really across the board, whether that's Airbnb and homes or, GetYourGuide and experiences or Booking.com and Expedia and hotels. Consumers really used general search in Google previously to, type in things to do in, New York City or, MoMA tickets. And then ultimately would all be world-class at like building the best landing page to convert that customer, and, create a ton of urgency and then basically get them to check out as quickly as possible and done. And, that was basically online travel for a very long period of time. Now, we all figured out that during the pandemic, when we could kind of like look at our business models, that there's a much better way of doing that. And that is actually having consumers come to you directly. And that is why, you see all of these brand marketing campaigns now and everyone trying to move up the intent curve and trying to address consumers when they're really thinking about travel. When I talk to my team, I always say, when consumers travel anywhere, They should have the Get Your Guide app in their travel folder, and they should be opening it and searching for things to do. So it's really much more about the long-term direct consumer relationship. And that's really where you need to start to think from. And as you think from the direct relationship with the consumer thinking about things to do in New York City, in Paris, in Cincinnati, right? That's when you need to think about how can I build an experience that's really appealing, so that consumers actually don't need to go to Google to type in all these different things, but they do get inspired through our app. And that's been very much the focus that we've had over the last 12 to 18 months.
Okay, that goes into something my colleague DeWitt was just talking about, TikTok chipping away at Google's dominance in travel marketing, in the sense that consumers today are they're doing their research through different channels that aren't starting with the Google search. And brands can sort of take advantage of that. And it's in a very simplified way, instead of starting Google with your search and then bouncing back and around, you might go to Airbnb if you're interested in vacation rentals, or you might go to GetYourGuide for experiences. But I want to, just one more time on the verticalization, I want to push back a bit, because Skift had an event in Dubai last month. I at a Skift Global Forum East, and I interviewed the CEO of Yanolja, which is a super app, very big in South Korea. And to a certain extent, the super app model is a horizontalization. It's sort of like you come to this one place and you get everything. I'm going to get my hotels, my transit. It's also SoftBank backs it, just like SoftBank backs GetYourGuide. And a year ago, for our Megatrends, I interviewed on stage CEO Steve Hafner from Kayak. And Kayak's model essentially is trying to get attachment. You come for the flights, and now we're going to try to sell you a hotel. And so how can the horizontalization sort of go on at the same time as the verticalization?
I'm fundamentally not a believer in horizontal travel platforms. I don't think that we will have the super app of travel. I think we will have very specialized apps, whether it's your train booking app or whether it's your experiences app, for a specific use case. Because fundamentally what we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, right, everyone said, Expedia booking, everyone said, connected trip, everything in my app. The reality is just the opposite happened. You have a homes giant now with Airbnb who's done really well in that vertical. And that's very close to the core accommodation businesses of Expedia and Booking.com. You have GetYourGuide excelling at experiences, outgrowing everyone else. Why? Because we're just focused on that. We're just focused on that consumer problem. And if you think about vertical search and experiences, I'll give you a very concrete example. I visited my team here in New York City, which is right opposite to One World Center. And then I came here and I tried to book 2 experiences on the way. And that's actually a really hard thing to do, because ultimately the app needs to know that I'm in destination right now, that I want to book for the next 20 to 30 minutes, that I'm on a certain path that I need to navigate, and that I've already been in New York City before, and I need to do something new, something that I haven't seen before. So I ended up booking the 9/11 Memorial, which I have actually never seen in my life, and I ended up going to the latest MoMA exhibit. But that already gives you an idea in terms of the data connectivity, what we need to get from suppliers and what we need to then show to consumers. That's a really tough and unique problem that is fundamentally different from hotel search or flight search. Hotel is really about location and price. In experience, much more about quality. It's the type of experience that you want to do. Whether you're with kids, whether you're a European traveler in New York for the first time, or whether you're in New York actually doing something on the weekend. So we're really solving this really complex problem with a very heterogeneous supply base. And we need to put all of that into one small mobile phone screen. And that is a challenge that is not easy, but the beauty is that the advances in technology that we're currently seeing in machine learning, in mobile apps, in being able to predict much better what consumers actually want to do when they travel, are really helping us solve that problem. And I believe you'll look back in 10 years and you'll be amazed how old school people were looking for experiences as compared to what will be possible in the next 5 to 10 years. And I firmly believe that 2023 will be the kickoff year, because the big change that we've seen from 2019 to 2020 and what enables that verticalization in the experiences industry is that the suppliers really want to be online. In 2019, half of my supply base basically said, oh, GetYourGuide is a great platform. You guys are growing very fast, but I don't really need that many more customers, right? I'm fully booked. And then during the pandemic, suddenly everyone flipped and was like, yeah, we actually do want online traffic. And they started to log on to GetYourGuide, so like they started to become our merchants. And then suddenly they saw the power of that channel. And they started to understand how they could manage that channel in order to just make incremental profits. And since then, the world has really changed.
Okay. So I guess what I would build off of that is, I met you and Tao, I think it was the end of 2014, and that was the year you had your Series A of $25 million. It was the year TripAdvisor had just bought Viator. Most people were still buying tours and activities offline. And you and Tao had a theory, which is that everyone at that point, it's hard to sort of go back in time to that time, but the mobile phones in everyone's pockets it was still like just getting as prevalent. The idea that you would actually book on the fly like that was new. Most people would walk to your downtown and you arrive in Zurich and there was an information booth and you'd maybe find out about a walking tour or that way. And you guys had this bet that there's this long-term consumer trend. The devices are going in people's pockets. Apps are big. And so you've ridden that for a decade now, and you've raised more than $600 million in equity, since then. So you're now saying for the next decade, it's personalization powered by machine learning is what you're going to be riding. Is that right?
That is right. If you would summarize it, that is right. And I think for experiences, this is even more meaningful than for accommodation businesses. Because if you think about it, you only have so much time to spend on your trip. I'm in New York City for 3 days. I have a very compressed time schedule. I still want to have fun. And I'm just a very specific traveler because I've already been here multiple times. So, I need very different recommendations than, for instance, the German couple with kids that comes here for the very first time, or the New Yorker who lives here. So ultimately, the challenge that we have to face as experiences platforms and in personalization are very different from the accommodation players. And I do believe cracking that nut will unleash tremendous value. And one more thing on that, what we can increasingly see, and that goes back to the travel intent curve that I was talking about earlier, we increasingly see a lot of traffic earlier in the year. Ironically, so you'd think with smartphones, as you said, and this was my original thinking back in 2015 as well, that people would only book closer and closer to the date and destination. And it's true, that trend has been persistent. A lot of people book last minute in destination. But overall, the booking patterns at GetYourGuide have actually sort of like increased. So people are actually booking earlier now, further in advance. So a big surprise to me, and on smartphones, right? So it's kind of weird, why would people book early and in advance? Because they like to plan, they like to put together the itinerary, they start to browse, and it's this interesting trend, and we can see it right now in January, honestly, which is like complete low season in the experiences category, that we have a ton of traffic already coming to the website where people are really informing themselves of where they want to travel. So there's a point where experiences plays a really important role, and that's actually in figuring out which destination you want to go to. Then typically you book your flight, you book your hotel, you kind of like have the basics covered, and then you move into like the real planning and booking phase. And that's really something, again, that if you talk about search and experiences that you really have to think about, because if someone browses and discovers is a different type of use case than me being in New York City and wanting to book something right here, right now for the next 2 hours.
I think it's a very fascinating sort of like data point to back up what my colleague Seth was talking about this generation being much more interested in experiences. It becomes sort of a trite thing to say at some point, but is actually changing their behavior. The experience part of the trip, they're now planning in January. And if you're a travel marketer, you actually have to change when it is that you're trying to inspire people. When are you going to run that campaign on Instagram? Because where the funnel is may have changed because people may be shifting in their space. I guess, so my colleague DeWitt was talking about generative AI and just the broader, what is your take on like what the potential is for machine learning? What should we understand? Because most of us here are not following it, and you have more of that background.
Yeah, so maybe a ways of background. So I'm a scientist, and I've already sort of like learned about computer science and machine learning back in school more than 15 years ago now. And I've always believed in the power of it. I think we will think of the next 10 years as the decade of AI. It will be as transformative, or probably even more transformative than smartphones in the 2010s. So I think every business should be paying very close attention to that trend right now. And it will transform a lot of parts of travel. Just to give you a couple of examples where I believe it will be playing a massive role. Think about GetYourGuide customer service, so our care team. Roughly 30% of the contacts are pre-booking. So consumers asking for recommendations. Typically, right now, an agent basically looks up the GetYourGuide website and types something in. This will be done by an AI in the very near-term future. If you think about, a lot of our merchants need to provide really good photography, like the augmentation you can do, or even generation of photography these days with tools like OpenAI's DALL-E is amazing. I recently tried just gave the AI a view of a red bus in front of Westminster Abbey. Just tried it out, and it's perfect. You can literally generate a picture, you can generate text and description. You can use it for even things like improving your productivity in coding, right? So it's just incredible what the potential is. And we've embraced machine learning already for the last couple of years, so it's not something completely new to us. We have a relatively good team, and we use it from anything from predicting travel demand in the future, steering our online marketing activities in the most efficient way, to ranking and relevance. So the example that I just gave of what are the most relevant things to do around me right now, that's also machine learning. And I think we're just at the beginning of this major trend. I can't wait, to be honest. And I'm a big believer that while 2023 from a macro environment is obviously a year where we all constrain and try to become more profitable and more nimble, this is the one area where everyone should invest.
Okay. So you're from Berlin, where your headquarters are. In Europe, there's a lot of push for privacy regulations. And some of the major platforms are shutting down the third-party cookies. When you want to put this trip together so that that I'm someone who's been to Paris 20 times, so I should get some sort of information, but someone else it's their first time, so they want a different thing. How are you going to pull that data together to be able to develop that picture?
That's a really good question. Obviously, GetYourGuide is not only active in Europe, but also in the US. And so I have a pretty good overview of the different systems. I'm personally, I have to say, I live in East Berlin, and the wall, stood just literally 500 meters, so that's very close to my house. And in the part where I lived, it was just normal that people would spy on you, right? And so I'm sensitive towards privacy. I think it's a very important good. I think overall there is a middle ground between the very heavy regulation that we have in Europe and de facto no regulation, what we have in the United States. Obviously, very little regulation is great for business. So as GetYourGuide, that's fantastic, and the strong regulation in Europe is somewhat inhibitive. But on the flip side, we've worked a lot on solutions also with our advertising partners like Google or like Meta in order to target consumers in a really good way. And I don't think that you necessarily need to go to the full degree of knowing everything about that customer. At the end of the day, it is always more important what you do on your own side and the level of service that you provide on your own side. That's always the bigger driver of conversion than optimizing the ad targeting with the advertisement partner. But last point on that, I certainly do believe that the way how the privacy regulation currently is set up in Europe is not necessarily to the benefit, of the broader ecosystem, because it's a huge advantage, with the, owned data, privacy laws. If you're a very large platform and you actually basically own the consumer data, it certainly depresses, I think, smaller advertisers. And it's not a big problem for GetYourGuide because ultimately, so I can travel with TikTok and with Meta and with Google. You have these massive partners who can really help you target the consumers in a very cost-effective way. And as I said, it's really much more about your own site than sort of like harnessing all of the consumer data, through the big platforms. But still, I do think there need to be amendments later on, because ultimately, my point of view personally is much more about data security as an individual than about sort of like very strict data privacy across the board. Ultimately, we all want to be targeted with relevant ads.
So experiences and tours and activities are fun. So what are you thinking about in terms of this year? What do you feel customers are going to be especially interested in experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've seen over the last years, pre-pandemic and particularly this year, that there's been a big change away from what I would call the old and lame sightseeing world of sort of like poor consumer experience buses and large sightseeing tours that truly none of us want. And they've been decimated frankly, through the emergence of marketplaces like GetYourGuide, where consumers could review, right? So if you go back by a decade, the world in experiences was still ruled by old school tour operators, where consumers couldn't leave reviews, right? So and there it was really all about margin. And then suddenly you have places like GetYourGuide and others, where consumers can leave reviews, where the ranking algorithm is really influenced by consumer loyalty after they take a tour. And the biggest determinator for consumers to become loyal to a platform like GetYourGuide is the experience that they have in destination. So we have a huge vested interest in making sure that you have a 5-star experience. And that basically meant that you had this plethora of like highly innovative, just like interesting guides and experience creators that started these really special experiences on the platform. For instance, around here, one of the best-selling guys in New York City is Scott's Brooklyn Pizza Tour. I didn't even know that there was like famous pizza in Brooklyn, but it's massive, right? So went through the roof, and there dozens and dozens and dozens of these examples. So the most successful experience creators and supply partners on GetYourGuide are typically people who used to be one-man bands or very small companies just a couple of years ago. So we've really created this marketplace together with them. On top of that, what I can see is that the big IP holders, so the Disneys of the world, to give you an example, are increasingly coming in. And what they try to do is to co-create with us very unique experiences that ultimately promote their brand. And that's the other mega trend that I would say that I see in 2023. I don't want to spill the beans because we have a lot of things to announce.
Spill the beans!
Next time. So I think you guys have another forum in September, and by then I can talk a lot about these. But ultimately, what we've been seeking to do with a lot of these bigger brands is try to understand how we can unlock value for them by creating really special and exclusive experiences on GetYourGuide. And if you think about what would be the most amazing experience that you could do, something that would be super memorable. One thing that we've launched last year, which garnered massive media attention, actually has millions and millions of YouTube views at this point in time, is that we've partnered with the Vatican, which is one of our major partners in Europe, and created this unique experience where people can go into the Vatican before the opening hours with the Clavigero. That's the key keeper of the Vatican. So you literally get the key and you can open the Sistine Chapel and look at Michelangelo as the sun is rising. Amazing.
It's really magical.
Oh,
yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but that's definitely on my bucket list. So that's a huge experience, and we've seen massive traction around that. And there's more and more of that type of experience coming. And the Vatican, for instance, immediately said this was so successful and was such a YouTube hit that they now promised us to kind of like also open Castel Gandolfo, which is the summer seat, the papal summer seat, which you can't even visit right now. So there are lots and lots of these new experiences that will come out, and different tastes as well. Think about sports, think about lifestyle, fashion, right? There are lots of things that you can do. And that's the other trend.
So if I have a CNN TV show or Netflix TV show, it's a travel show, and then I want to monetize that, I can come to GetYourGuide, and you might help create an experience?
I think that's the future of the experiences platforms, that ultimately the way how I see it, in the mid to long term, it will be like a Netflix in the real world, right? It's like we talk about it internally as kinetic experiences. You have massive mega shows that people really love to come to you for, and then you will have a lot of long tail as well, as I said before, that is is really interesting for some niche audiences, like the people who love pizza tours or who love pizza in general. You'll kind of like see a bigger and bigger catalog. The big difference to the big streaming services is that ultimately, because we have a lot more destinations, a lot more consumer interest in travel, the catalog will just have to be a lot bigger. Even today, we estimate there are roughly 1 million experiences. I think there will be many millions of experiences in the future of what you can book. And that's good, because ultimately our tastes in terms of what we want to do with our time are just so different.
So the tech challenge for Get Your Guide is even bigger than for like a Netflix, which is sort of an amazing thing.
It is much big. Like it is much more complex for two reasons. One reason is Netflix gets you multiple times a week. Get Your Guide obviously has increased frequency now with increased selection, but gets the consumer 2-3 times a year, right? So we have less data points than a Netflix, which means our machine learning needs to pull different tricks. Ultimately, needs to listen to different signals. Weather, where you stand right now, what we know about you from your booking history in the past, and there are multiple other signals that we track. And then the other challenge ultimately that we need to overcome is that just the catalog, as I mentioned, is just so much more diverse and so much bigger. So we have more to choose from. Netflix or Spotify, ultimately, everyone is kind of like listening to the same things and everyone is watching the same shows. I mean, if you talk to people about the latest Netflix shows, like everyone says the same, right? So the personalization is actually not as big as you might think. It's certainly very important for us.
Okay. I love this audience question. So do you see an increase in demand for sustainable activities and products?
Short answer, yes. But to be totally honest, today this is relevant in Germany, where I come from. We are like big sustainability freaks, and we totally love it. And I think that's personally I subscribe to that thesis. And you see it in places like California, for instance, where I would say if I would point to one ecosystem where sustainable travel and sustainable activities and experiences are really at the forefront, it would be places like San Francisco, Hawaii, for instance. Every time I go there, it's really top of mind. And as you go back to the unique and exclusive experiences, for them doing that in a sustainable way and also reducing the amount of people that can, for instance, go swim with the dolphins or with the whales, right? So that's a really important topic. We internally have developed this eco badge where we kind of like certify partners alongside with external agencies. I have to say that we haven't been making it as much of a priority as we wanted to, simply because we had other things like search, discovery, relevance that I just talked about. But I definitely do believe that over the next 5 years, this will be one important pillar in our industry. And the good thing about marketplaces is that we can drive that change, right? So we can incorporate that in the recommendation to the travelers. And I certainly want to do that, and I certainly want to see that. I do think, however, we also need to be realistic, right? I think that's coming from Germany, kind of like we always believe kind of like now everyone has to adopt to our standards. And the reality is a large part of Get Your Guide's revenue is also in destinations such as Thailand or Asia and other destinations. And people there just suffered for 2-3 years from COVID, right? Their businesses went belly up. They had a lot of different worries. So I don't think it's the right thing for me to come in and like say, hey, the first thing that you need to do is you basically need to prove yourself and sustainable experiences. I think for now, for a large part of the developing world, what we actually need to do is to give them jobs and to give them money so that they can build the experiences. And then in a second step, I think it will be about sustainability, and that will become a much bigger focus.
That makes logical sense. How do you view players like Airbnb moving horizontally into experiences? So they're starting from short-term rentals.
So Airbnb is an amazing company, and I have all of the respect in the world for them, and I love how they've built their brand. And obviously we've been studying that very closely. And to be frank, the halo that we've gotten from the experiences business has helped us tremendously build our company. So it's all good. It doesn't, however, mean that Airbnb gets a lot of traffic to those experiences, because if you ask consumers today, what are you going to Airbnb for? 99.9% will say homes. No one says experiences. If you ask consumers, what are you going to Get Your Guide for? Everyone will say experiences, because that's what we offer, right? So I have not seen a single online travel agent or marketplace or online platform succeed ultimately in having multiple verticals. And it's a very hard thing to do because if you're sitting in the chair of a Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb, and you have to allocate resources, particularly in the constrained environment right now, where are these resources going to go? Where are your best people going to go? Where is your mind share as a CEO going to go? That's really hard. And the analogy that people typically give for horizontal platforms is Amazon, right? Amazon is everywhere, and Amazon has all of these verticals. But if you think about it, the logistics infrastructure and the USP of Amazon is the same for all of these commodity retail items, right? Whether I ship a book or whether I ship, something else, ultimately, the USP of Amazon is the same, and I, as like a different retailer, will need to compete with that USP. If you think about Booking.com, or Airbnb, and GetYourGuide, they have no strategic advantage over us in the supply infrastructure whatsoever. Just the other way around, we have built a massive supply infrastructure over the last 10 years that they need to compete with. And the attach rates that you have from accommodation products to experiences is incredibly low. We've been partnering with a lot of them, so it's not that big. So ultimately, I'm not very concerned about other travel platforms moving into our space. I think our space will certainly have fierce competition from different platforms focusing vertically on that problem space, but it's such a distinct problem space with such a distinct merchant base and technologies that are just completely different than lodging or flights, that I don't think that will be the major battleground for us over the next couple of years.
Okay, I regret we can't get to all the audience questions, but thank you for them. So rapid yes or no answer. Are you going to IPO this year?
I haven't seen Wall Street being very amenable to IPOs, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Johannes, so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.